Hello and welcome to the Level Up Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Gaetano Morello, and today I have with me special guest, Milain Fayulu. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's pretty right.
Awesome. So Milain is someone who I was introduced to through a mutual friend, just one of those guys that really has the X factor. And by that, I mean he is a social guy. He's the man about Miami, but yet he's an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, and going after causes that really make a difference and an impact on his community. He's lived in seven different countries across the world. He calls Paris, the Congo, and Miami his home, but he is now here in Boston studying at MIT. And we have the pleasure to hear from him today and learn a little bit more about some of his entrepreneurial ventures and Congo Clothing Co. So Milain, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Milain, could you give us a little bit of your background, where you grew up and sort of maybe, how the history kind of unfolds and into where you are today in Boston?
Sure. So I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1991. So that's about 30 years ago. And very quickly, I moved out of the Congo because my parents sought opportunities abroad. We moved to Paris in France. So I sort of got my early days really in Paris. And when I was about 4, we moved to the United States, outside of Washington, D.C., in a city called Fairfax in Virginia. My father was working for an oil company, ExxonMobil. And we stayed there for a few years. And then we went back to Paris. And then we embarked on an African tour, still with ExxonMobil. And that got us to Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Mali. And then when I was about 13 years old, my father decided to step aside from his role and sort of like focus on his own venture in his own country. And so we moved back to the Congo. So that was really my first experience with my country. And then I spent about 2 years there. I was going to the French school. And I had this passion for soccer. I really wanted to become a soccer player. And I sort of, begged my parents to send me to soccer school. I sold them on a dream of me becoming a pro. And, they made it happen. So they sort of like shipped me back to Paris, where I attended boarding school. So I was, going to school during the day and playing soccer in the afternoon. And I did that all the way up until my graduation in 2009. And that's when I came to the United States. I sort of realized that I wanted, to get an American, higher education experience. My father had studied in San Francisco himself, so he was very keen on the American college system. And so I took that leap of faith. And when I was 18, I moved from Paris to the United States. So that's what, brought me on these shores. I went to University of Miami and I graduated from there in 2015 with a degree in finance and economics.
Awesome. So that's such a great history there. And tell me how, you made the switch from finance to, entrepreneurship, because, you had this finance background in college. You come out of college and all of a sudden you're launching, I think it was a cosmetic company called Aven was the first one. So can you just explain sort of that transition there? Why did you decide to be an entrepreneur?
Right. So when I was about to graduate, I had to make a decision, right? So I was very much on the path of, I had done many internships throughout my college careers at big companies, big banks, worked at Citibank in New York. And, really the natural step for me was to, go into finance and, get a Wall Street job at one of these top banks. But then I realized that that wasn't really my calling. And I felt like if I was going to do that, it was going to be for, like 3 to 5 year stops anyways. rack in what people call experience. And I felt like, I could just, like take a leap of faith and, like get started with operating my own ventures. I felt like I had enough experience just from like doing internships. I understood kind of like the rigor of, like the corporate world. So I felt ready, like mentally, like and skills wise, really to sort of like, jump in and start on my own. So that's why I became an entrepreneur, like from the get go.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think that so many of us out of college, lack that sort of willingness to take that leap of faith. And I think that's really one of the main characteristics that makes entrepreneurs so successful is, their willingness to step into the unknown, to take that leap of faith, push through fear. And I would say that, that's probably in large part attributable to the success you've had today. And am I right on that?
Yeah, right. And I think obviously it's everybody is different, right? So I think the number one thing is you really need to be honest with yourself, right? Do you feel like this is the right like sort of like step for you, and if you feel like you've got the tools, if like mentally you're ready, then definitely go for it, right? Some people do need like the experience. Some people do need the rigor of the corporate world, or like like working under someone to sort of like like fine tune certain things before they can truly go on their own. So everybody is different. I really felt like my previous experiences had prepared me like well enough to just dive in.
Awesome. And, with there's a common theme throughout the ventures that you've launched. And I think that there's an underlying greater good, or they're impact driven businesses. And I think that having a deeper meaning and a why behind these ventures can be a huge catalyst in pushing them forward. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Right. So I took this approach of looking at entrepreneurship really as a way to solve problems. Because I figured that wherever there's a problem, if you manage to bring in a solution, then financial rewards will naturally follow. So, I look at spaces that I'm, generally interested in. So in the case of my first startup, which is a cosmetics, skincare business, we looked at the state of the skincare industry globally, both here in the United States, in Europe, and in Africa. And we realized that, there's a huge gap in the market and not enough, products that were sort of like catering to the needs of people with black skin. And some of the problems are different depending on where you are, right? In the United States, the problem was mainly the fact that you didn't have enough of products that were sort of like engineered or communicated towards, like the black consumer on shelves. When you looked at the problem in the Congo, same space, but there it was more about other companies trying to come in and, sell to the public, products that would essentially, turn their skin white, right? So there's kind of like a cultural issue there with, the promotion of like skin whitening that quite, that didn't sit well with me. In any case, we came in with a product that addressed the problems in both market, right? In the US, we managed to provide something to the consumer that looks like them, that's engineered for them, that really promotes a message of, like self-empowerment and Black is beautiful. Same thing in the Congo, Black is beautiful. There's no need for you to aspire to becoming, like lighter skin or white. And so that's the problem really we're fixing. So it's both like a societal problem as far as, like a representativity and like, like really scientific problem when it comes to the actual R&D and value of the product for the consumer.
Yeah, that's great that you can fit, both of those together. And, I think another parallel that I'm seeing here is, of course, the many countries that you've lived in, has been a huge influence on these businesses because, you know, when you came to the US, you know, you could draw on, you know, past experiences from the Congo, or, you know, see these gaps and these different problems that, you know, you could easily solve because of, you know, all of the geography that, you know, you've traversed over the years. So how is sort of travel and growing up in all these different cultures played a role? And lastly, the second question would be, you know, having grown up in the Congo, or at least spent a good amount of time there in your early childhood, do you feel that you have, you know, an obligation to serve that country and to make it a better place?
Well, for the first part of your question about growing up in all these, you know, different places, yes, I think it definitely helps. I think what it does is that it gives me and, you know, kids in general who lived in different places, different countries, it gives you a lot of reference points, right? So you are able to make connections, you know, I think faster. Um, Culturally, you know, there's a lot of depth, and also the most important, I believe, is you can really connect on a deep, sincere level with different people from like all around the world, right? You know, when I'm in America, you know, my culture at this point is very much Americans. I feel like I'm an American, right? I studied here. My business principles are pretty much American. I can relate to Americans. You know, when I'm back in Paris, same thing. You know, when I go to Congo, so you're very integrated to a lot of cultures at the same time. So that gives you that insider's look, and it also gives you like a lot of reference points. And I think that when that's kind of like sitting in your head, it allows you to look at things broadly and to find, I guess, solutions, you know, like you know, somewhat, you know, maybe faster than the average person. As far as the second part of your question, do I feel an obligation to help my country? I wouldn't say it's an obligation, but I think that, you know, I'm a pragmatic, and I'm also, you know, like someone that really wants to add value. So when you look at, you know, like the places where I can add value, so technically here, like I'm geographically present in the United States. United States has a lot of brilliant people. It's the most advanced economy in the world. I mean, you have kids here who are, you know, like Harvard, MIT graduates, and you know, some of the most brilliant people in the world are here in America. The largest companies are in America. I don't think that America will go, you know, like will like needs Milain Fayulu. You know what I mean? America will be fine without me. However, Congo could benefit, you know, from my experiences, from my knowledge, from, you know, like all the tools, you know, like that I racked in, you know, like over my time here. And there I can really see how I can be impactful, you know, like beyond anything I could possibly accomplish here. So when you start looking at, you know, like the value that you can bring to like the two different ecosystems, you know, obviously the value I can bring to Congo like significantly outweighs the value I can bring here. And that means that you can change more lives. You can be obviously more impactful as far as the economy is concerned. And that's really my goal, right? So where can I maximize my impact? So the answer is Congo.
Got it. And I don't need to remind you that you are one of those MIT students that you just referenced. So I would definitely wouldn't make light of the impact that you do have here in the U.S. But obviously, I understand your point very clearly. And tell us now, you know, what are you up to make an impact in the Congo? Tell us about your latest venture.
Right. So my latest venture, it's called Congo Clothing Company. It's a clothing brand. It's a partnership with the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Dr. Denis Mukwege. And the concept is very simple. So we manufacture clothes. Our first collection is a capsule collection. We sell denim jackets that are elevated with Congolese culture, specifically culture that's called the Kuba culture. It's a 17th century kingdom that was extremely powerful back in the days, and women were very well known for the use of geometric pattern. So we're essentially combining denim, which is very ubiquitous in Western culture, and we add that touch of, Congolese culture to make it cool and, like add a bit of color to it. And essentially what we do is every time someone purchases one of these jackets, we give about 30% of the proceeds to Panzi Hospital and Dr. Denis Mukwege so that they can use the funding to, one, train the survivors that they care for, and second, once the survivors are discharged from the hospital, give them a sewing machine so that they have a marketable skill that can essentially get them closer to financial independence. So when I thought about, how to maximize my impact, obviously I thought about multiple, frameworks. I thought about creating a foundation. I thought about, working with, like charities on the ground. And then I figured that it would be best if I could leverage what I know how to do best, which is start, like launch businesses with, a good, like a social mission. So that's when I came up with the concept of Congo Clothing Company. And it's a really interesting play because we needed a vehicle to essentially get people interested in that issue of rape in war, which is unfortunately pervasive in our country. And I sat down with the doctor and I praised his work, and I told him that when you look at, the state of, like millennials and like, like Gen Zs and whatnot, obviously there's that huge problem with, like lack of attention that I'm sure you're familiar with. We have so many things that are like constantly like, like stimulating us. You have your phone and your Instagram notifications, and you have your emails that are popping up on your computer. So for our generation, especially for people from our generation who are based in the Western world, who have access to like all these things, it's really hard to care about, like women getting raped, like in a country 6,000, miles away in the middle of Africa, right? They might, like see something on CNN, whenever CNN, like cares enough to like, like show that to the people here. But then very quickly they'll get back to business as usual. And it really shouldn't be that way because we're talking about a very, very serious and dramatic issue. I mean, we're talking about moms, daughters, like sometimes as young as like 4 years old being raped.
And this is happening as we speak right now.
And this is happening as we speak. As a matter of fact, if you want some statistics, the American Journal of Public Health, so this is an American organization, says that there's about 48 women that are raped in the Congo every single hour. So that's about a rape a minute. So we've started this conversation, about 20 minutes ago? There's been about 20 rapes over the course of, like our short conversation. So it's a very, very serious issue. And obviously the issue has ramifications, right? It paralyzes communities, it renders people unproductive. So I thought to myself, how do we raise awareness, number one, because I believe that solving a problem, always starts with awareness. But number two, how do we, like provide for these women so that, they can sort of like get a second shot at life? And the number one piece, right, which is awareness, that's when, clothing came into play. Because with clothing, it's not me going to you, Gaetano, and asking you like, hey, there's a very tragic, like situation unfolding in my country. Can you please give me $50 or $100 and I'll use that money to help these women? You might give me that money, but you're not really connecting with the issue. When I'm bringing in culture, when I'm bringing in something that has value or it could be useful to you in the form of a clothing brand, in the form of a jacket, that you can buy, that you can wear, that's aesthetically pleasing, that you can start conversations around, then that completely changes the framework. And we're seeing it now. We've been, live for about, 3 months, and we see really our thesis materializing because our customers are truly becoming ambassadors because the jackets are cool, like aesthetically they're nice, people like them. So, we have a lot of customers who find themselves, rocking the jackets in Milan, in Paris, in London, in New York. And people get stopped an average of 5 to 10 times a day. Hey, where's this from?
The jackets are unbelievable. I actually just ordered one. And the best part about it is you can customize them, and they come in all different sort of designs. And they're super cool. I love them.
Yeah. Thank you. So the jackets are conversation triggers. And when someone asks you, Gaetano, where is this jacket from? You will find yourself telling that story I'm telling you about the women. It's a brand from the Congo, and they're partners with the Nobel Peace Prize. And then you have a conversation that starts, and that narrative travels, but in a very soft and subtle way that's extremely digestible for a millennial or a Western customer that's not necessarily well versed in the problem. So that's how we fix, the first issue, and we raise awareness. And then comes the impact part, right? Because the 30% of the value of your purchase, we take that money, but instead of just giving that money and, turning a blind eye on whatever is being done with that money, we're very specific with our goals. So we use that money specifically to train the women. We teach them how to sew, because obviously that's aligned with, our line of business. And we're not saying that, everyone, every single woman there has to be a seamstress, but we just want to leave you with a skill. If push comes to shove and there's nothing else for you to bring food on the table for your kid and your family, you have that skill that we taught you, and you have that machine that we give to you once you're discharged from the hospital. You can pick it up and you can make a trade, and you can gain financial independence. That's what we want. We want to teach people how to fish. We don't want to give them fish.
Yeah. You mentioned pragmatic earlier as a description of yourself, and I'm seeing that throughout this entire cause. It's very hands-on, it's material, and actually just simple and works. Hey, do you have a jacket handy that you could show right now?
I can get one from my closet if that's fine.
Let's see it. I'd love to show them. Yeah.
This is one of the models that we have. So as you can see, it's very, very high quality denim. This denim is probably better quality than the Levi's or even the fancy stuff like Givenchy. And, when I spoke about, elevating the denim with, African fabric, you can see here. So everything we do is based off of these geometric patterns that you can also see in our logo. And it's all zigzaggy, right? So you see all these zigzags, and we strategically place them around. When you open the jacket, let me see this one because it's closed. We have a Congolese flag inside. Everything around the jacket is extremely detailed. So it sort of reminds you the Congolese culture. So we have a piece of Congo with you. So we have these flag in the inner pocket.
That's awesome.
With some references to places in the Congo. When you look at the buttons here have essentially the slogan, the motto of the country. So it's justice, peace, and labor. Obviously, that's not really what's happening right there at the moment, but it's just a good reminder that that's what we should, aspire to. We've got these little, red tags here. And then you've got, this model, which is more kind of dark blue. Here we went crazier with the pattern. So you have these orange patterns here on the front, and you also got them on the back here. We also have the logo here, close to the neck on every single jacket. And we have 4 models. So there's a red one, there's a yellow one. They're all very cool, and they all have their own sort of spirit.
Yeah. Where could we buy one?
You can buy one on CongoClothingCo.com.
Cool. And if we wanted to follow you on Instagram, where could we find you?
So same thing, Congo Clothing Co. On Instagram.
Awesome. I mean, that's just a phenomenal venture. I love what you're doing. I kind of want to ask one more question. I remember a while back you sent me an article on the history of the Congo, and I think I was reading about, the 13th century Congolese empire, and it's just something that really blew my mind. And it just kind of, maybe that's the answer to this question, maybe it's not. But what would you say is the biggest misconception about the Congo, maybe among Americans?
That's a tough question. The biggest misconception about Congo. So I don't want to put, I guess, like words in people's mouth, but what I would say, I would answer your question this way. I would say that Congo and Congo's trajectory was essentially altered by colonization, right? Like oftentimes, I think when we think about, like Congo and some other African, countries, sub-Saharan African countries, people fail to realize that these are countries that had their own systems of governance. We had kingdoms, right? Like my company takes inspiration from the Kuba Kingdom, which is a 17th century kingdom. So before, colonizers and the white men came, there were systems there, with, like our culture, our arts, and, like systems that were often thriving. So it's really important to realize that, like this sort of like organic trajectory was halted, right? And that's just history. I'm not one that kind of like, like dwells on the past and wonders like, oh, well, like if, like the colonizers hadn't come on our shores, we could have been this, we could have been that. But it's important to realize that there's a constant quest, I think, like in Congo, to sort of like reconnect with this lost identity, right? And we're very much still, like struggling with that. So that's what I believe, that using business, fashion, product to communicate about, like these, like forgotten, like moments in history are very important. And that's the real power of the entrepreneur. You're really driving and moving culture forward, because if it's not for Congo Clothing Company or my skincare line or any other venture I may launch in the future, I mean, who's really going to tell our story, right? Your story will be told by, like some guy sitting in London or New York or Paris from his perspective, right? So that's the, like white man perspective. And then, you don't have anything to say because you refuse, like to communicate about, like what you believed was the history that was worth communicating on. So that's, like how I see myself, like we're storytellers, and we really try to bring out, ideas that may be forgotten. So I guess to answer your question, think about the Congo as, like this, like very culturally rich place that goes back, like that predates, like colonization and the white man's conquest.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's incredible how, your businesses are progressing the narrative of that culture, looking back on the past, but also kind of paving the way for the future. So thank you for coming on. It was so great to hear a little bit about you and hear about Congo Clothing Co. For everyone listening, check out the website, pick up one of those jackets. They're super cool, connected to an amazing cause. Milain, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.